This video is about just getting an image ready before you mask it and work with the color. So if I jump into Photoshop, I've got an image here, and what you will find is that under image, if you have a look at adjustments, you have all these options here. So this is just kind of getting the contrast, everything right. Then you've got the next section that deals with colorizing the image. And then underneath that, you've kind of got things that are more kind of special effects. Now the problem is if you use this menu up here, so if I go to the levels and I do something, that's affected the whole image. The only way I can get rid of it is to go Command Z and undo it. So what we want to do is we want everything to be non-destructive. So down the bottom here, we have the adjustment layers. So this little circle that's half black and half white, if we click on it, we're going to find we have the same kind of functions through here. Now, these four here are dealing with this kind of tidying up of an image. So if I go to the levels, and you'll see it pops in here. If you've got more than one layer, you use this, which is called clip to clip the layer, a clipping layer. So if you click that, you'll see it jumps in. If this window is closed, then you just hold down the Option or the Alt key, and when you go between these layers, you'll see that it changes. So you can click to undo it, or to do it back on. Because this is only one layer here, it doesn't really matter so much. But never work with the output levels, because all you're doing is you're restricting the tone. If I bring this in to about 50% or halfway, it just means the whole image goes from 100% black, and the lightest part will be 50% grey. So you're really restricting the image, and there's better ways of doing that. So with this, we have a middle slider, we've got a dark and a light. So by dragging the light slider in, dark slider in, I'm giving more contrast. Another way of doing so down the side here you have these eyedroppers, and this is another way of doing it. So this top one will set your darkest point. So if you think this down here should be pure black, you can click in it and that will be your black. This one down here is your white point. So if I see this is my absolute white point and I click on it, that's going to give me my my white point. And obviously the one in the middle, if you can work out what you think is 50% grey, you can click on that, and that will give you a bit of contrast. The nice thing about this, if I close the window, because of the non-destructive nature of it, I can switch it off, I can switch it on, or I can just drag it and drop it in the trash. So if I come back down here to the adjustment layers, so there's the levels, there's brightness and contrast. So simply just a very crude version of the same sort of thing, brighter or darker, giving a bit more contrast. Sometimes the best way to work is to have a combination of all of these functions going at once. Exposure I'm going to leave out. Curves is the one that is probably the most professional. So this is doing the same sort of thing. You can see you've got the eyedroppers again and a few other tools, but with the slider, you can see if I'm pulling that in, you can see down here it's kind of doing the same thing as the levels. If I pull that in, pull this one in, I'm giving more contrast. The typical standard curve for contrast for a good image is what they call an S-curve, and it means that you grab a point up here and you make the curve a little bit shallower at the top, and you do the same thing here. So the middle point is going through the same place, but we're just pushing that curve up and down. It's a subtler way of doing the same thing as pulling the sliders, because you know when we did it before, it was quite crude to just drag it in like that. So a little bit of an S-bend is a subtler way of doing it. The reason curves is so much better than the levels is because with the levels you only really have 3 sliders. You have a white, black, and then you have one for the midtones. But here we can actually add in as many points as we want so that you can adjust very, very small areas. So essentially it's levels, but with a lot more sliders. This thing here just kind of smooths everything out because you can get the pencil and you can literally draw through this, hit the curves, and it will try and join them all together to make those transitions a bit smoother. To get rid of the points, you can just drag them off. And they're all going to disappear and the curve's going to more or less go back to normal. So I'll give a little more contrast. The other thing with this as well is you have all your levels. At the moment I'm kind of working on the master, but if I wanted to go down to red, then I'm just simply now working in the red channel. So for example, this is our kind of white and our black. So if I drag this up, it's adding more red into the image. Here it's kind of sucking it out a wee bit, so you can really play with the image. You can see if I drag the slider in here, what it's doing is there's no white. It's just there's going to be this level of red. So you can play with all these, and you can go in. You can go to the green. You can drag that down to either add more green in or alleviate the green. You can play around with these curves, and then if I go back to RGB, you'll see it gives a readout of everything that's going on. I can hit the reset button down here, and that's going to take it back to normal. And you'll see if I move this, I can let's make it more distinct so we can see something actually happening within the image. And you can see with the eye, so at the moment we can see that the eye is on. So when I make these changes, you can see them taking place, but you can preview. That's what the image was, and that's what I've changed it to. So sometimes it's better to switch this on and off, because when you see that kind of flicking between the changes, subtle changes are much easier to see. So it's fine. So I've got that there, and like I say, if I want to add in a wee bit more, let's go to exposure and see if we can brighten it overall or darken it a wee bit. You'll see that all of these functions have customizable options that are in there already. The gamma correction, offset. It's not a function that I really use. The exposure one, I do everything through the curves or the levels. So I've got that, and for the sake of it, I'll just I'll leave it as that. The last thing that that I do is I use Unsharp Mask. Now the problem here is it's in the filters, and if you do it, it's going to degrade the image. So with this image, what I want to do is I want to click on it. I want to click on this little hamburger menu and convert it to a smart object. Once I do this, I can scale it down, and if I scale it back up, it's not going to degrade the image. I'm not going to get interposition. And what it means now is I can come up to the filter, I can go to sharpen, I can find Unsharp Mask, and again with the preview, it's nice to flick things on and off to see what's happening. Usually, if it's a good photo, I have it on about 90, and the radius on 1, and the threshold on 0. When these other things become more important, changing the radius and things is usually when you've got an image that's blurry or it's a lot harder to sharpen. Then you can kind of play with these and kind of pull it back a wee bit, but in general terms, the best option is having the radius on 1 and then playing with the numbers a bit. So maybe I'll put this a bit higher, and if I enlarge this window here, I can click on and off with the hand tool. I can see what's happening. This image is at 100%, so if I switch the preview on and off and look at this image, you can see what's happening. It should look, especially when you're looking at the veins on this leaf, it should look like it's just coming into focus a wee bit. And that's what you're after. But now, because it's a smart object, this filter can be switched on and off, and it can also just be trashed. So again, it's using it in a non-destructive fashion. So for me, this is the way that I tidy up an image. I'd go through, I'd use the curves and the levels, I'd tidy it up that way, and then I'd go in and give it a bit of Unsharp Mask, and then the next step is I could go in and work with the colours.